So, why pick him for a subject of a digital biography? Well, obviously, as you put it, it's a brilliant story. I mean, that first and foremost. Secondly, he was one of his interests, he was a biographer, he had an interest in new technology. And there are practical issues. I mean, a lot of people, when I first started talking about this, said you need someone to do this about someone well known. Now, there are several issues with that. One is, unless they've been dead for quite a long time, you've got copyright issues. Secondly, the fact is you don't want an enormous amount of data, and I think that's partly what the Nietzsche people are having issues with, is the sheer amount of material that they need to kind of incorporate. And the third reason was, well, actually, I started off doing a PhD, which I dropped to write a book when I got a book contract. And when I started doing that, I created a database. So I created a database. So this is a bit the history of the project. The whole idea about doing it as you meet people was when I was working with, do you know about Trace Online Writing Centre? I know that you'll know about Trace with Sue Thomas's thing. It was an idea for exploring transmedia writing, which ran until about 2005, 2006. I was working with Sue when they did a project in 2003 with a writer called Tim Wright. Has anyone? He does a lot of very interesting. Look him up. I think he's Moon Golfer on Twitter. But he's done loads of transmedia writing, and he did this whole project called In Search of Alton, which was about getting people to contribute images of a town that had disappeared and rebuild this town. I was doing the PR on that, and that was when I started thinking about, hang on, you could do biography like this. And so there I am there. I went around talking about it at all different places, and for years a lot of people just went like this. When I said, I want to do this mad digital biography of where you get to meet the person as if you're getting to know them in real life, and I want to do it on this crap 18th century poet that no one's ever heard of, and obviously there was loads of interest. But eventually, I developed the idea a bit with, about IFBook, the Institute for the Future of the Book. I know Sandy does, did a talk with Chris, the Institute for the Future of the Book UK. I developed the idea a bit with Chris there. And then I went and talked about it at something called Book Hack Day, which was in almost 2 years ago now, May 2011, where I met Michael, and I was trying to persuade someone to actually start work with me and build this thing. I talked to Michael there, and he said, well, I'm just starting out a company, I don't have the technology to do it. I carried on talking about it, and I did a talk with, have you come across Unbound, the publishers? Yeah. I was giving a talk about the future of the book with John Mitchinson, who's one of the founders of Unbound. For those of you who don't, is people not familiar? Not familiar, okay. Unbound is kind of a different organisation. It provides all the services of a traditional publisher, so sort of commissioning projects, so choosing projects, and combines that with crowdfunding. So it's kind of online, and it's kind of incredibly modern, but also it's incredibly 18th century and old-fashioned, because basically it's publishing by subscription. So I did talk, and he went, and John, who has a similar sensibility to me, went, crap 18th century poet that no one's heard of, you must come and do the book with us. So I said, yeah. And then I was doing, so as a result of that, I was giving another talk for the literary platform. Do you know about the literary platform? Look that up. All about narrative books in online and book apps and in different media, run by a fab woman called Sophie Rochester. So I went to talked about what it was like crowdfunding for a book, which essentially is like, if sending your book out into the world is like sending your child out into the world, doing your book with a crowdfunding site is like selling your fetus, which feels both disgusting and unethical. But there you go, you've got to learn to do it. So and then at that meeting, at that talk, Michael was again there, and he came up to me and he said, "Okay, I've got the technology now. Do you want to do it?" So I went, "Yeah." So there we go. Because I always say yes. I always say yes to everything. It's got me in terrible trouble, but I've had a lot of fun. Okay, so. From there you go, how do we do it? That is the basic. There you go, very old-fashioned, because I started this probably in around 2000. Biography Pro database, which has now got about just over 2,000 records in it, which are my notes. It's extracts from William Hayler's writing. It's extracts from writing about him. And one of the things I did all the time there was I keyworded. I mean, initially I had lots of different ways of doing it, so event types and event types that things, different quotes would relate to, and subtypes. I've ignored that now. But what I had all the way through was cast, whoever was involved in that bit of text, whoever was mentioned, and keywords, so all the important issues. So what I'd done effectively was I meta-tagged the database. Not, you know, not rigorously, not brilliantly, there are typos, there are mistakes, because it was initially my research database, and still is my research database, so I still use that now. So I did that, and then in order to make, and also it had all page numbers and volumes and all that data, connected that, related that to the database of all my sources, so that I would, when I actually came to writing, and that was my solution to the footnoting problem, which is just, I would then have all my information would be there for footnotes when I came to write up. So there we go. So that's the material. I then started thinking about journeys through it. So I took one bit, which is the gossip bit. Haley's wife Eliza wouldn't have sex with him, and he fathered his son with the daughter of his nursemaid, which is what everybody thought until a few weeks ago. And then I looked at all the different places you could go from there, and at that point my brain exploded, because I just wasn't capable of thinking through those things in the way that needed to do that, was needed to actually make it work. So you want to have a quick look. So it's all about, you know, his relationships with women, his friendships overall. You could go in so many different directions from all that sort of thing. It just did my head in, even thinking about that tiny little part of it. Okay, which was where Michael comes in. That's Michael's company, is Contentment. And they are doing beautiful things that enable small publishers to produce apps. I don't know if you're familiar with the book app market and the book app development that people like Touch Press are doing. So things like the Wasteland app, the Elements, all those kinds of things. They cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. They're beautiful, they work pretty well, but by God, they are beyond the reach of most people to produce. So what Michael's trying to do is creating something that enables people who don't have those kind of budgets to make stuff. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do feel free to interrupt me. Anybody feel free to interrupt me if I start talking rubbish. I will. Okay, so this is what the challenges are, I think, of this kind of approach. There's the content. There's the development thing, which could be. Okay. There's the reader journey, reader involvement, the character that people this. Because if it's going to work in a way that mimics meeting someone in real life, the person who's reading has to believe in the character that's in there. There's the limit. You know, you could go mad. I mean, this could be one of those never-ending projects that, you know, it could be that you spend your entire life putting more and more into and finding out more and more, and yet never completing. So that's one of the issues. And also, this is supposed to be non-fiction. Now, this will limb the boundaries between fiction and non-fiction, because once you start getting some interaction going between the subject of the biography and the reader or the participant or whatever you like to call them, that's no longer non-fiction, is it? Because he ain't there. He's dead. He's been dead forever, too, almost 200 years. And, you know, it's that's no longer strictly biography, as we understand it. Okay, so the content, again, this is where we're starting from. This is what I have given Michael is a subset of my database, which I have exported into HTML. Internet HTML kind of tabley thing. That's the technical term, tabley thing, so because I am very technical. And what I did was, his memoirs are all written in the third person. I extracted, first of all my records that relate, all the quotes that I got from his memoirs, and I edited them a bit, and I put them into the first person and checked my tagging. So with that, and because his memoir is chronological, there are dates as well. Some of them have dates, some of them don't. But you've got a timeline from the page numbers. You've got other ways of linking up from the casts and from the tag words. Now that database is that's 445 records. I have given that to Michael. I don't know if it's going to work. We don't know if it's going to work. We can only play and see what will happen. Along with that, there'll be, of course, all the visual artifacts. There's loads of images, there's portraits. He had loads of, if your best mates are painters, you have loads of portraits nowadays. There's loads of him, there's one or two of his wives, his mum, and all the people in there. So there we go, that's the text. In a way, there are issues with that, but in a way, that's, when we're starting, that's the least challenging thing, because the content is there. The organisation of it might be a bit of a nightmare, but the content's there. The development, again, there you go, that's Michael's. How far, where are you at with Codify now? What's the...
doing lots of stuff with magazine and book publishers.
So they're starting, they're building the application. That's Michael's company's, that's the product. And the reader journey is, as I realised when I sat down and started to do that graph of all the ways it could go, is going to be is quite a challenge. We've had a bit of a think about that. And one of Michael's ideas, which was a great idea, which was how do you start? How do you find out where people should start? Now, for a start, they've got to have the choice. If they want to just read a linear biography, they can read a linear biography. If they want to make a choice of a kind of area of his interest, so for example, his writing, his ideas on education, his love life, just his friendships, his family, you could choose from things like that. But what would be really brilliant is if we could get readers to fill out like a dating website form initially. So we know about them, and that suddenly occurred to me from your talk. That also gives us quite a lot of evaluation. It gives us an idea of who's doing what, who's looking at the app as well. And then they'd be matched. Their interests would be matched. And throughout there'd be a number of triggers which would be partly on the basis of reader choice, partly on the basis of the chronology, the actual time period. So if you hit it at a specific date, it might be something that William Haley was completely obsessed with at that time, and whatever you wanted to talk about as the reader. If it was a time when he was trying to get William Cooper a pension, and he was going to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Exchequer and bursting into tears and begging them and telling them that Cooper deserved it and he needed it and it might stop him going really mad, he'd tell you about that, whatever you wanted to know about. Because that's what people do, isn't it? If there's something that's really obsessing them, they'll get it out there. Other times, for example, might be about how long you'd spent in the app, how much time reading you'd done. So, for example, the first thing he told you probably wouldn't be that Eliza didn't want to have sex with him. You probably have to get to know each other a bit before you did that. I've also got some other mad ideas which may or may not work. If we can persuade people to have a calendar there so they can put in their engagements, what they're doing, and their mobile phone numbers, I think it would be really good if they're going out on a date, for instance, he could text them some terrible 18th century relationship advice. But that's a bit side. The other thing we'll also have to do is have a really good map of the content so that people can see where they've been. Because it's not a game. It's not a game in that way. It is a book, and you need to see what you've read, but not do that thing that really annoys me with interactive narratives where you can't go back and explore the other things, and you can't go back where you've been, and you can't see everything that is to be seen. For me, the whole point, part of the point of this is it is a whole, it is about completeness, eventually, and it's a reading experience in that kind of way. And you need to know where you're at. You need to know what you've seen, what you haven't seen, and where you have to go to get more of it. So there has to be a good map. Timeline, of course, you need the chronology, and there has to be a finish. I interviewed Teo Gray from Touch Press, creative director, brilliant man, about one of the things that made the book happen. And he was very clear that one of the things that differentiates a literary app from a website is the fact that, like a book, it is bounded. So you do reach the end of it, it doesn't go on forever. And that for him was also, it's also about a selling opportunity, because, you know, people as a whole generally are reluctant to pay for websites. But there's something about moving the app from the screen of your laptop and having that going onto your handheld device that people will pay for. So there's that as well. But having said that there's got to be boundaries, it's nice if they're porous, because ultimately, obviously, what I imagine is this kind of social network for dead people, where all these different interactive biographies kind of link up and meet each other. But again, that's quite mad. So there we go. So, reader involvement. I have no idea how involved people will want to get in this. It's you know, you can kind of guess. I can say, well, a younger audience who are more used to this kind of thing, or people who do games may want to get more involved. The other audience that I have in mind for this, who are kind of basically people who love costume drama, may just want to read through and have bits of video and may just want it to go through with them and may not want to put their data in. But I don't know. I don't know how much interactive, I don't know who will want to read it, I don't know how much interactivity different people will want, and like I say, I expect it will depend. And I don't know how much choice you can give them without driving them nuts. I mean, that's the other thing. These are all things that remain to be explored. And something that came to mind back in December, basically what I was thinking about, Michael, and again, it was at the literary platform Rich Mix Writing Day. Someone came along and talked from the Arts Council about Nesta's Digital Research and Development Fund. And I just thought, oh, that'd be great, and then we need a researcher. And then just before Christmas at another event, I met Sandy, who was talking about all these sorts of things, and I thought, oh, that would be really interesting. What he's talking about is great, and that will fit in really well, and we'd be interested possibly in doing the research. And we've been communicating a bit about that. And he's talking about doing a kind of we're talking about doing possibly an artificial intelligence version of Hayley, which is developing the character initially. And at first that kind of didn't compute for me, because I'm a very sort of, not necessarily little brain, but you know, it's kind of a skewed brain, it doesn't necessarily go in all directions at once. And then I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, actually, doing that and using the emotional matrix to map things will really help on the writing. And it suddenly occurred to me that I'd been thinking about all the content, all the stuff, all the writing, and I actually thought, in order for this to feel like an experience, in order to mimic the experience of getting to know someone in real life, there has got to be emotional content. And that emotional content has to vary. And so how do I do that? And I think what I'm thinking is, if that does work out, is that I think ultimately, technically, it won't make much difference to the way we actually build the app with Contentment and Michael. What it will make an enormous difference to is how I write and what I think about when I'm writing and what I write, because I think what I'll end up with going down that route is a much more layered approach to writing, and where I would have just said, oh yeah, we'll just give them this bit of text, I will end up producing perhaps 3, probably maybe more, slightly different content text-wise, demonstrating a slightly different emotional state. Does that make sense, or does that sound completely nuts to everybody? I don't really know. Don't have much insight for that. Okay, so that's the thing, and I don't know, quite we're going to do it. Okay, the limits. It's terribly exciting. I get terribly excited about this. I could devote my whole life to thinking about what we could do, how we could do it, and wouldn't that be fantastic? But that's not necessarily realistic. I mean, when I say I want to produce a digital biography that where you get to meet get to know the person as if you were meeting them in real life, I know, certainly in the first instance, that's not realistic. It's not going to be that. It is going to fall short of my vision, as much as when I was 8 and I tried to make Pegasus out of 2 toilet rolls, a bit of papier-mâché and some pipe cleaners. And, which was my first experience of real artistic disappointment. I can tell you it was crushing. I don't know how much of it would be desirable. I don't know how big a thing people will want. I have no idea whether it'll work. No idea whether it will stimulate that at all. I hope so, because Michael's brilliant, and you know, and working with someone who is incredibly clever and has a great structural brain and a great development brain and a whole team of people working with it. I think gives it the best chance probably. I also don't know what will constitute success because I don't know whether it'll work or not. I don't know what will count as success at this moment in time. And finally, is it still biography? I don't know. Is it different? Is it just? Will it be the biography? Will it just be as Paul Arthur said? Is it just be a different conception of the biographical subject of the biographer and of biography in ways that we can't yet understand? Or is it just fiction? Does it become a game? Does it just become a historical novel kind of thing? What's the difference? Where is the difference? Thank you. And obviously, because I am selling my fetus at this moment in time, I have to ask you all to go to unbound.co.uk/Hayley Wells, and it's not www. Actually, it is just unbound.co.uk. I'll delete that superfluous www. And contrary to Lynn, William Hayley does tweet. From the 18th century, he interacts with people, and I would argue with that and say, actually, there's loads and loads. If you spend a lot of time on Twitter, there are loads and loads of dead people tweeting. And most of them have much more following than William Hayley does, because I'm taking it quite slowly. There's just not much time to do that. So thank you very much for listening.
Is there any question?
An observation, really.
Yeah.
If you imagine that what you could assemble is a very large set of paragraphs or short essays, and there was some kind of semantic description of what they were about, then in telling the story of the essay, rather than just allowing the user to select random routes through there, what you could devise is a set of rules which say these are legitimate routes through this graph. And then it becomes a planning problem, and potentially somebody can almost sit and have a story told to them where, you know, you've got a kind of a reasonable path, a coherent path through all of these facts.
Yeah, I mean I think that's basically what we're. Yeah, that's
right. Well, that feels very close to what we do in interactive storytelling anyway, really,
yes.
in terms of some ways of building stories.
But even more, if you consider each section like a snippet of a story, what you could do is you could allow the reader to leave trace for other readers. So that will build up different story or different angles. So they say, oh, have you seen, you know, all the love of this guy? So they will follow the love trace. Yeah. Or have you seen all the friends that he had? And they will go to the friends trace. And so different people could leave trace, which might make more audience participation, engagement, you know, going towards that. So that they're also maker, although they're experiencing a narrative.
I mean, it came out of the idea that this was already happening, just not, which was why I thought of it in the first place, because that's, you know, it's not an original. I knew it wasn't an original technology. What it is just a different application because people aren't really doing it biography. That's the thing.
Yes, just following from that in terms of interaction and how people contribute. I did some work on where you try to do a similar thing with archives, which I suppose are not a biography, it's the biography equivalent of something else. So as an example, say we're doing one of BT's archive, which is a colossal thing. And how do you make that interesting? And that's quite one of the things. And what I think makes a difference is that if you can take people's interaction with it, because that will add bits, for instance, which you might not know. I know Hayley lived a long time ago, but people's emotional responses to it might be very valuable, and they might be the sort of thing precisely that you'll get other people interacting with. And I was fascinated on my question, is this still biography? Because of course, in a sense, it has to be fiction, isn't it? Because you're getting to know someone that didn't happen, and you're actually going to do that. And I think that's really interesting because you're writing your own bit of fiction, and the more, in a sense, you can absorb that into the biography itself, I guess the more interesting it will be. So really, really interested in how this is going to work out.
Okay, so thank you very much.